Welcome to the REI Diamonds Show with Dan Breslin, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Show with Tod Holland on how to advertise on Facebook for sellers. I'm Dan Breslin, host of the REI Diamond Show. Today's guest, Tod Holland, is the chief economist for Home Sotheby's International Realty in Southern California. Tod is also a Facebook Blueprint certified social media specialist with a focus on real estate and loan officer marketing. I personally run 90% of all the marketing activities for Diamond Equity Investments, our house flipping company. So I'm familiar with, and I am doing many of the things that Tod and I are going to cover in this episode. If you've been here listening to the REI Diamond Show for any length of time, you probably already know that at any given time, I'm in the middle of about 80 or so deals, either under contract, under construction, or waiting to go to closing, all done directly with sellers. Well, actually, I've been buying quite a few of my deals from my loyal REI Diamonds listeners lately, so thank you very much for bringing me those deals. But here's the point. I'm investing big money every month in advertising, including Facebook. And although I'm not an expert, I am knowledgeable and I am making money from Facebook advertising. But after recording this episode with Tod, I'm completely rethinking my strategy, increasing my budgets, and hopefully increasing my income as a result of the Facebook ads that I run. As always, this episode is another guaranteed note taker, so get your notebook and let's get started. Welcome to the show, Tod.
Hey, thank you for having me, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a nice day out here in Chicago. No complaints. How about yourself?
You know, similar over here. I'm out here in sunny Newport Beach, so it's beautiful, sunny, and nice and warm.
Nice. So for those of our listeners who may not know who Tod Holland is, can you give us a brief history of how you kind of got started in real estate, what led up to where you're at, and what you're doing in your business today? Kind of the Reader's Digest version, Tod?
Absolutely. And, to make a long story longer, I'll start it off here. I started real estate the second I got out of high school. I mean, I knew for a fact this is what I wanted to do. And while I was in high school, I was actually taking the courses. So I got in the business on my 18th birthday. From there, I got my broker's license. We eventually set up a company called Tod Holland International. It did quite well in the virtual office sphere. We represented a lot of investors, overseas investors from China. From there, I started my own mortgage company and real estate company conglomerate called Homes and Loans Done Right. Since then, I've been in the education sphere, teaching other agents, teaching other brokerages how to basically maximize their time and use the latest tools to streamline what they're doing down to the very nitty-gritty, which is the human factor of our business. I've set up the Lumenwood Marketing Group for that, and I'm the creator of Insight CRM, which is just a piece of software that I've created to help all this kind of come into fruition, make everything a lot easier for a lot of people. So that's the Reader's Digest version of who I am and how I got here.
Cool. So can I ask how old you are now, Tod?
Absolutely. I'm 26.
All right. So 26 from 18, you're talking about 8 years in the business. So have you had a lot of experience in the real estate arena to then develop the Insight CRM approach?
Absolutely. And, we've gone through numerous different markets and aggregated those. So when I was doing my first work as a real estate professional, I was in luxury San Francisco listings, which, as we know, for anything luxury West Coast can get into the 2 comma club very, very easily in terms of value and just project cost. So that's where I began. I moved from there to a tertiary market, which is more of a secondary market that doesn't have the same overlay with the Dow that we'll see in luxury markets, but still, it exists in like a volatile sense. And that's, for people who are aware of this in California, that's kind of most of Southern California, Orange County, Los Angeles County, Riverside County, all those big areas are what I call tertiary markets that based on, and I should have started this earlier. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'm actually the chief economist here at the Home Sotheby's Realty Group. So what I found is that these markets I just mentioned, the tertiary markets that I base my CRM on, are actually indicative and representative of 90% of the markets in the entire country. They share some of the same characteristics, which is very exciting. and it kind of unifies the data we're looking at too as real estate professionals.
Cool. You mentioned the overlay with the Dow affecting the luxury market. Would you mind enlightening my listeners to that? That was a really great point you brought up, and I think that's important to drive that home for everybody listening.
Absolutely. We just recorded this, I think, great series of lecture videos and courses on how, and Mike Shapiro, who's the chairman of the Home Group and kind of the mastermind behind a lot of what we do, he's been saying this for years, is that the luxury market will by and large mirror what the Dow is doing, simply because the Dow is basically an aggregation of what the economy is doing. It's the 500 biggest companies currently on the market and what their activities are, and the overlay of that compared to even micro markets, Dan, of, let's say coastal Orange County, which we'll call luxury because everything here is about $9 million plus, and we've got some $45 million listings as well. But even when you go the very, very micro data approach of these markets, you'll find that when you map the prices of a certain area out on a geographical timeline, a timeline based on overlaid with what the Dow has been doing in that same timeline, you'll see that the shape it makes, almost down to the month, is identical in volatility and velocity. So what that means is that if you look at the shape of what the Dow did in the past 5 years, and the shape of what, let's say, my neighborhood or possibly even your neighborhood does in that same time period, the shape of that graph is going to roughly be the same. The only difference, I don't want to get too technical and boring here, but this matters a lot for real estate investors who are, in fact, honing in on this particular kind of data mining and kind of aggregate analysis to do what they do, is that the interesting part is that the luxury markets are less elastic, so they're less responsive to changing circumstances on the Dow than our tertiary markets. So, for example, if we see a 1% decline, that's substantial, a substantial 1% decline on the Dow, we're going to see that same change mirrored in luxury markets maybe 4 months out to 6 months out, whereas with tertiary markets, we're going to see that in about 1 or 2 months, which is very, very cool, and it says a lot about the environment, the climate of these two markets and what contributes to them and how much resilience they have to changing market factors. We find luxury markets have huge safeguards against changing economic factors. But when you look at tertiary markets or what I'll call average, like 90% markets in the country, they don't have those same safeguards. So their changes are very elastic or very responsive to time. So when X event happens, they don't take a whole lot of time to recognize that in their own property-wide and, frankly, MSA-wide, zip code-wide, however you want to look at it. They all kind of behave the same way as they do this. I know it's a lot of information to kind of absorb right there, but the takeaway there, the short of that is whatever the Dow does, so does the real estate market. The question is, how long does it take for the real estate market to mirror the Dow? And that has to do a lot with where the property is located, whether it's a luxury or a tertiary market. Does that make sense?
It does. That's interesting. Do you have any guesses as to why that is? Is that just the national psychology at work there, or is there some other explanation as to why that takes place, Todd?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's probably a multi-part question because I think psychology plays into just about everything that we do. In fact, back in a previous life, and I was getting my degree in economics, that was what I focused on, was basically consumer behavior, social economics, right? What is the impact of how we feel, what our preferences are, and how does that impact our decisions and valuations of things? What I found to be beyond that, though, and that's certainly a very real factor, but beyond that, what I found is that in general, and this is kind of more of a speculative thing, but I believe that luxury markets treat their assets in a different category or class than does someone in a tertiary market. And what do I mean by that specifically? So when we're analyzing what's the worst case scenario, like what will happen to someone should the real estate market correct itself 20 or 30% or sometimes even more, like we've seen, in my opinion, just as an economist, I don't think it will ever get as bad as it did, but because of safeguards. But if a correction happens, how resilient is the homeowner to being able to keep that property and to be able to justify keeping that property? Because any small change, let's say, for example, in interest rates, that will impact whether someone can afford a home in places like Riverside or Chicago and things like that. But in places like luxury Orange County, for example, we don't really see the impact of insurance rates as substantially as we do in the housing market, we actually tend to treat them the same as changing market rates or bond rates, because the way that people respond to those, they effectively treat, and this is especially true in the luxury second home markets, they treat what they have as an investment. Whereas most people, when they get into a home, they treat it as, less of an investment, more of a consumer good, even though they recognize that they're kind of a combination of a consumer good and an asset and investment in of itself. They recognize less of the consumer good aspect of it and more of the investment aspect on the luxury side, because they have more options. It boils down to the opportunity cost of getting out of a property that's underwater. If you have, let's say, $100 million, like many of our clients do, in the bank or in the market, something like that, you have options. Whereas if you lose, the one home and you're living paycheck to paycheck, or even if you have some menial savings, you're going to find that it's much harder to adjust. Your opportunity cost of adjusting your living situation is much, much higher. And that's one thing that we've seen too, is as far as a divide between luxury and tertiary, it's simply that, the rich have more options than do, average you and I kind of guy. And that's just the simple way it is from what I've seen.
Great points. I'm just taking notes here. We could probably do a whole episode on this, Todd.
I bet we could.
Cool. Yeah, maybe we'll do a follow-up, but I definitely want to kind of switch gears here just a bit. So give me a little bit of a rundown of your experience in real estate. Were you doing listings face-to-face here? Were you managing teams? What kind of numbers of listings had you kind of put together? And then where I'm going with this question is leading into leveraging social and digital media so that we can kind of talk about some of that advertising stuff, which I win big with a lot of that stuff, so I'm excited to get to that part of the conversation. But just so that anyone listening has a base of reference as to like how you developed these systems, came up with them, what your experience was while you were doing that, and to what level of success.
Yeah, Dan, that's a great question. And I think I want to address maybe the sub-question behind that first, which is it's almost impossible to get a proper system built without having your boots on the ground and building it around what you're doing. I think that's very key. And I think that you'll probably kind of agree with me too as we go further here, because when you're in a back room and you've got like a pen and paper handy and you're building out this system, for example, to segment 80 different kinds of prospects into different categories and automatically follow up with them with text messages and voicemails and emails and, and mailers, other forms of communication, it's so easy just to plan that from a desk, but to actually be in there and see who responds to what and be able to adjust those things on the fly. I think no great system was ever created in one go. And we're going to find that with what I do, about 80% of my personal pipeline, I'm still a broker. I'm their economist, but I'm still a broker privately. And 80% of my personal pipeline, and I would say maybe about 50% of my investor pipeline, all comes in some way, shape, or form from utilizing social media properly. And that's, I think, a very huge and very important point to go into, is that, NAR reported, and this was back before Facebook even got as big as it is and Instagram got even as big as it is now, but a great deal, I would say 91% of agents, based on the 2012 records, and it's obviously much higher now, admitted to using real estate using Facebook or social media in their real estate business in some capacity. Now, what we found on further interviews and analyses is that only about 7% of that 91% admitted that it actually works, right? Because everyone uses it, but everyone's kind of like, well, I posted this, or I boosted this, or I ran this one ad and I didn't get anything. So, by definition, it doesn't work. And I think that's, almost the opposite, because again, what most people are doing when they build a social media campaign or a system based around it, or any kind of lead generation campaign, is, they do what someone else tells them to do. And that someone else may be in a market, let's say Dallas, Texas, and you're in Chicago and I'm in Newport Beach. And I guarantee that neither of our ads are going to look the same and get the same amount of traction. But, so the blanket approach definitely doesn't work to start out with. That's a guarantee. But what does work is split testing, A/B testing. Split testing is huge for anything you do. Even if you're the guy who only does, EDDM, every door direct marketing kind of a thing, you still have to have an understanding of what postcards people reply to, what postcards people don't reply to. Now, what split testing means in a nutshell is simply that you have two campaigns running side by side to the same audience, and you're measuring to some degree of accuracy what percentage of your audience responds to one campaign versus responds to another campaign. And I think that, and it's very simple to do that, and it's almost automated in every system that you're going to use, Insight included, but many of the other competitors, they all automate this in a way that if you have, let's say, 500 people who you're targeting who've responded and you want to see which specific emails, or the verbiage in those emails, the pictures in those emails would appeal most to that group, all you have to do is create 2 campaigns, run both of them to half of the, so 250 people each, and then from there see who responds more and further limit it down. Because what we find is that there are nearly perfect real estate selling systems, both on the investor side and on the brokerage side. The issue is they didn't get perfect on the one get-go, and didn't get perfect without any testing. So the testing, the split test, the A/B testing is so crucial to everything we do, even phone calls, even scripts on phone calls, be able to split that and say, okay, half the prospects I'll say this script to, and half the prospects I'll say this script to. And for example, we're targeting people who are in distressed home situations, and we want to convert them to have a conversation with us about potentially listing their home for one of our investors, or for investors simply just buying it outright as an entity. There's a whole series of closing that requires that to go on in the prospect's brain before we can even get to a position of, okay, whether we're going to do this deal with that person or not, whether they're going to do the deal with us. And there's a bunch of mental, like almost milestones that a conversation needs to address. And getting to those milestones is challenging, and it's variable. So I think that to be able to test everything out, that's my number one thing, is like be able to again, my short answer to a long story is to be able to test everything out in some kind of, meaningful, segmented way, only picking the path that works best and then testing that path out further, see if you can further improve that or not. And what I've done through this, I've gone from having, I think, like, when I first started, it was something like 8% of my pipeline came in through social media. Same budget. I haven't increased my budget. I haven't done anything. But now, based on the fact that I've spent a lot of time split testing it, I know kind of what works and what doesn't work. I'm almost 10 times that amount now. I'm like 80% of my pipeline comes from social media. And that's a huge, huge difference because I've replaced what I do traditionally with social media entirely. But if you're not, and you focus on what you've been doing that works, and you add this new way of thinking, this new way of getting business and branding yourself to the mix, you're only going to see an increase in revenue and thereby an increase in profits. I mean, because it's almost costless to run these kind of campaigns as compared to Google AdWords, for example, which can be just egregiously expensive and have, frankly, the same results as you'll find otherwise, in my experience.
Let's do this, Todd. Can we pick like one campaign and just like really dive into the details of the example, maybe a few of the aha light bulb moments that you had along the way as you perfected that campaign and what that campaign is actually sourcing? So if you're going after listings, let's talk about what that prospect is thinking, what image you used in the ad, what text you're using in the ad, what other things you're using, as your backup there, and maybe some of the split tests and how you got to the result that you're now obtaining or getting through that ad effectively today.
So this one, and it depends in every market what you're going to be going after. In this particular market, I was going after distressed homeowners who are either tax default or pre-foreclosure. Okay. When you run, and this is the difficulty I had here. So I'll go into the different aspects kind of one by one. We're going to start with audience, right? Audience is the most important of any of these categories we're going to go into, because if you have the perfect offer, the perfect ad to the high school football team, I guarantee none of them are going to buy or sell their home because they're all 16. So it's important to get the targeting down the right way. So what I did, I dipped into a program called Cole Realty Resource. And for, any investors or agents representing investors, this is huge. It's also hugely expensive. So I don't recommend just diving into it without understanding what it does. But what Cole Realty Resource does, at least for me, is it allows me to upload a spreadsheet of addresses that match a certain criteria in my trade area, place that I want to do business, and run it through the system, and I get the cell phone number and the email address for every single person if it's registered on the internet somewhere at those addresses. So the benefit of that, aside from just having something to cold call and email, which you should do neither, because they could, likely be on the DNC or can spam or any of those things that you can violate. But what you can do is you'll take, and this is what I did here. I took that list. It was maybe like a spreadsheet of like 5,000 addresses. I plugged it into Facebook as a custom audience. And what that does is it says that anybody who's on this list who has this email address or cell phone number registered with Facebook will have their account added to my audience. So when I run an ad to that audience, that person who lives at that address will see my ad. Okay, and this is highly effective for a lot of reasons, because oftentimes you will be door knocking, you will be sending out mailers, you will be probably taking out some Google advertising. For those of you who are in bigger, prospects who will have a billboard or something. I'm not a huge fan of billboards, but I understand why people use them. The point of all of this is that, you're going to have to be everywhere, right? And so one of the easiest closes I've had, I'm going to get back in the system here, but with this particular funnel, I call each one of these segmentations a funnel, right? So with this particular funnel, the success that I've had with this is that first I run their information. I start running an ad. The picture of an ad I use is basically just a nice picture of a home, probably maybe sometimes one of my listings. It's not overly complicated. It's not like a carousel slideshow or like a video kind of a thing. You can make those, and they're very effective, but I don't recommend them for beginners. I think for beginners running your first ad, you want to copy what I'm doing. And Dan, I'll make this more available after the conversation too. I can send like a video link or something to show you like what I'm talking about here, so it's not just like they're kind of going by verbiage. But what it boils down to for the audience is now every single person on Facebook, right? Because that's where I'm running my ad. Every single person who lives in a house that my investor would approve of at least finding out more information about, right? I'm an investor myself. I don't invest in these price points, so I'm kind of priced out of the $2 million homes that I'll be marketing, but I have a lower one. But for my investors in this market, what I'm finding is that, basically if any one of these 3,000 people want to have a conversation about selling their home, then, the investor is good. Now, all these 3,000 people live in these addresses, are either tax default or foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, and a number of other parameters too, such as how long they've owned the home, what's their LTV, like their equity in the home, things like that. So I compute all of these together, and I just try to find the best one that I can. But what I found is that someone who's lived in a home for more than 7 years, they're more likely to sell. If they have an LTV of 80, then they're more likely. So if their equity is 20% or greater, they're more likely to sell rather than someone who's like on an FHA 3.5% equity in the home kind of a deal. So that's my audience. As far as the ad itself, which is also very important, I keep it very simple, and I try to keep it as untargeted as humanly possible, because Facebook will kick you back if, for example, you're saying like, hey, you're in foreclosure, you need my help. That doesn't fly for a variety of reasons. I think with privacy and a whole bunch of other things. But you can say things like, will you need to move soon? Do you need your house sold quickly and for top dollar? These kinds of things, people, well, yeah, that definitely applies. So they'll opt in further to have like an informational or conversational survey with me. That's on a landing page that occurs after they give me some information. So I ask six main questions, which, I think any real estate person wants to have the answer to these questions. What's your price point? Where are you looking to move? Like after? Do you need to sell your home first? Are you pre-approved? Are you currently working with an agent? Right. And I think that, you ask these questions in kind of a series. They're very non-personal, so they're not like invasive questions. And by getting that information, you can prioritize your sales calls based on who is most likely to go. If, for example, they're in the foreclosure, but they're saying they don't need to sell their home, maybe they're like in a little bit of denial, so that's not someone who's like already ready, primed for the conversation. But then you focus on the respondents that are. And again, not to keep harping back to insight, but what my system does is it allows your leads to score themselves. They don't know they're doing this, but just based on interacting with your content, answering certain questions, almost like a quiz, the lead gets a score, and that score is a reflection of how hot that lead is and how hot of a prospect it is for us to go after and try to communicate with. And you'll notice that even when we're just finding properties that we want to buy as investors, and this is kind of crazy, even when we're just finding these, it's the same exact idea as if we were trying to find buyers, right? Because we are the buyer. And because at the end of the day, this person who's going to sell their home, ostensibly they are going to have to move somewhere. And a lot of them don't realize that they're never going to be able to, own again in some set amount of time. They're going to probably have to rent. So a lot of people are still looking at, where they want to move to before they ever reach out to an agent. That's your sweet spot right there. But kind of before they get to Zillow, but after they've already had the conversation with their attorney or with the bank, or they've gotten the letter or something like that. So that's in like kind of a chronological way. That's your sweet spot. That's what you should be targeting. People in that range. And that's how I found the best way to do that is get them on Facebook, not Google, not Zillow or any of those things. Get them on Facebook. So that's where they go for their R&R effectively, and really just hone in on the audience, making the offer, making your landing pages. So the landing page is where the lead goes after they click on your ad. Make that look as professional and streamlined as possible. Make the survey short, and then have the end game here as a way to, schedule a free benefits consultation is how I word it. A free benefits consultation on the pros and cons of selling your home in this climate and what you can get for it, and in its current state, kind of a deal. And that's how I usually. And then I have my agents just know during that conversation what product, what incentive to push, right, to make it a clear idea is that, well, we have buyers already, they're investors, so you don't have to wait for a bank to go and approve things right away. They can go out, and all these things are very exciting. And you'll want to use the straight line principle as well, a little bit of the Jordan Belfort straight line principle, in bringing them back down to the call to action, which is, okay, well then let's, what do we want to close them on? Well, let's go and have like lunch, and we can talk about, or view the house, and we can talk about listing, and so on and so forth. You get enough of those in, sure, your investors is probably going to be, buying a few of them, but a lot of those are just going to be pipelines to build your own business up with referral transactions and more. This is for agents who are mainly in brokerage. It doesn't really apply to investors themselves. Investor just wants the product and be done with it. But for the agent who's representing you, if there is one, this is a great incentive and carrot on the stick too, to make sure they do a great job the whole way through, is to say, well, listen, the listing is yours. Should this thing work out the way we want it to? Most agents will see the value in a listing way more than the value in a buyer, even a very, repeated current buyer, because the listing can lead to more buyers. So for that reason, you can offer that to your agents as well, and just kind of as a carrot on the stick say, the listing will come after this, but first we have to get a sense of selling the property to us, buying it, and then putting it back on the market there. Oftentimes I found that, properties that sit on the market for like a day before they sell, when everything else is going for like 36 days or 70 days, something like that. It's usually situations like this where the selling agent, the listing agent, has no knowledge, no familiarity with the seller, but they have the buyer, so they go in and negotiate to list it themselves and do the paperwork and whatever the pitch is, so they can indicate they've gotten a two-sided transaction. And I found that's been pretty popular in my area and in some other areas as well, as more of a way, a funnel, the pipeline to do that. So kind of fun stuff when it comes down to the social media, the funnels and things like that, because like I said, just again, short recap. If you're just going to take like 2 minutes of what I say here as being concrete, it's in very, very large part to having a system in place to be able to segment out your leads that come in, but also have some information on how to run an effective ad. One thing I will say here is that in Insight, there's a series of courses that I built for myself. Again, why does my opinion matter? You've asked my wife, it doesn't matter, but why does my opinion matter? I'm actually an economist who spent the better part of my economic study looking at Facebook and how it impacts real estate markets, and we've kind of cracked the code on some certain things. So I think it'd be very cool to watch some of those videos that I have and get a sense of how to structure these ads, how to structure these campaigns to be actual facets of your business, right? Revenue generating ventures, as opposed to just these kind of like one-off branding, like, oh, we got 2,000 people to look at it. That's awesome. So, well, how many conversions, how many repeat customers, and so on and so forth. That's, I think, the stronger metric behind all of it.
So ad budget and bidding strategy, could you briefly touch on that for that same ad that we just discussed?
Right. So what you're going to find is your bidding strategy is your campaign, effectively. So what you can do, I automatically set my bids as to whatever Facebook wants to give them to me because of the way that I target. For a custom audience, you can say that, a custom audience of 2,000 people, you can set it like, oh, I don't want to send more than $5 a lead. That makes sense if it's cold traffic, but this is, inherently not cold traffic because you're retargeting to them. So it's not as cold. You already know they qualify for whatever you're aiming at. So what I like to do, when you're running your ads, and this is something that not a lot of people will tell you, because again, it kind of goes back into hacking Facebook's ads manager and a couple other things. You want to start your ad expenditure as small as possible. I'm talking like $1 a day. Okay. And what you want to do is you want to wait until you see some engagement on that. I'm not talking about like leads, right? Engagement, people clicking on it, people sharing it, whatever objective you put in there to see some of that objective registering. And then from that point, what you'll do is increase your ad budget no more than 10% every single day until you get to your target budget. And if you'd like, I can go into why that's the case, but if you guys trust me on this, that's the best way to make Facebook's algorithm really work for you and to get you the amount of people that they say they're getting you. Because sometimes they'll say you'll get in front of 300 to 1,600 people every day, and you find yourself in front of maybe 500, but you spent $20 a day versus I'll spend $10 a day and I'll get in front of probably the full 1,600 because I've given Facebook a chance to optimize based on my targeting, what I'm looking for.
Is that the reason why you start $1 and then increase 10% per day? You're talking about adding, $1.10, $1.20.
Yep. Mm-hmm. All the way up. It takes to get from $1 to $25. It takes about 2 weeks to get to that point. And so the reason you're doing that, it's almost like you have, let's say you have 10 eggs and you want Facebook to pick the best egg for you in terms of least amount of cracks. And it takes time to look at every single egg. So it can find you maybe 1 or 2 eggs, and then Facebook will bring you those eggs, and you'll say, okay, Facebook, now I want more eggs exactly like this. It has a way easier time of doing that when you just give it 10 eggs to look at, as opposed to if you give it 10,000 eggs and you say, okay, now bring me 200 eggs, and of these 200 eggs, I'll tell you what I like best, because you're really aggregating a whole bunch of parameters that you want to be delineating out, which is the whole point of optimization, is to delineate your parameters, not to aggregate them further. Does that make sense?
It does. So if I do it a short term, suppose I wanted to, market an open house, or I had a promotion going for just 3-week period, what would be the suggested bid strategy on something like that?
That's a good question. So what I would recommend if you're promoting an open house is basically to run it at, start it at $5 a day and start running it on Monday. Okay. And so, you're going to lose a lot of your optimization, because when you just do the one-off ads, unless you're running it as a new ad to previous ad set. So let me just do really quickly here. I want to answer your question, but I think to do that, I have to break apart ad sets versus ads. So ad set, what Facebook calls an ad set, is basically your budgeting and your targeting. I'm not sure why they call it ad set, but that's what they call it. So your budgeting and your targeting. Your ads are the different creative things that your prospects will see on their Facebook timeline. So what I'd recommend is, if you have a short-term ad that you want to run, what I'd recommend doing is building the ad set for that particular ad and then running kind of a dummy funnel being like an ad that's not really meant to go anywhere, but just in that same way to optimize those prospects out. And then on Thursday, for example, when you want to launch your open house ad, hopefully this has been going long enough to optimize based on the criteria of the open house ad itself, and then you just switch the ads, right? So you keep the ad set running the entire time to let that optimize, let it just kind of churn and get an understanding of who and what is going to be clicking on your stuff. And then once that's been optimized, what you can do is simply run a new ad to the same ad set, and then that can subvert the need entirely for you to have to re-optimize. It's just every time you're creating a new ad set, like a new audience or a new budget for an audience, something like that, at that point you're going to want to go back and optimize. But there's no reason, Dan, like you were saying, that you can't just do that a couple weeks back, right, and then switch it out to the respective open house funnel or ad that you'd be launching on that Thursday. And it'll be the exact same thing as if you ran the open house thing for 2-3 weeks.
And then the ad text that you had in that same ad, or you can choose to give me the best headline you've ever written that you were like, wow, this one was like a real bang out success. I'm surprised at that.
I'll give you both. So the best headline by far has been, get the inside information on exclusive homes in your area. Okay, that has been my go-to headline for just about, even when I run seller ads, I still use that headline, because sellers are just buyers who haven't sold their house yet at the end of the day. So the text, though, so the text is basically, I instead of reading it to you word for word, because that's one of the things I'm kind of hesitant about, because it feels like that if I read it to you, everyone's going to go type the same thing in. That I type in, well, this doesn't work in my market. But let me give you my formula. Maybe that'll help, Dan. Maybe that'll help a little better to have the formula down. So you always start the ad with a hook, with a question. okay, or with an identifying statement. So mine is, are you looking to make the move to Newport Coast? The next chunk of text is going to be outlining the problem, okay? So because they've already said, yes, I'm looking for a home, and then you hit them with the problem, and then that problem is, as you know, homes in this market move at the speed of light. If you want a chance at getting your offer in on time, you're going to want a list of all of the hottest short sales, foreclosures, fixer-uppers. And for this section, you don't have to choose what I do. You just do the things that apply most to your market. Some markets don't have foreclosure short sales anymore. A lot of them do, but some of them don't, and that's not relevant. We do. So I always go short sales, foreclosures, and hot pocket listings. That's the problem. The solution is something to the effect of, you've already covered it a little bit in the previous one, which is you're talking about, you need exclusive insider information from our team of local professionals in this geographic area. So you want to always have this set to be the most popular neighborhood of your town too, because you want the most people. For me, it's like everybody wants to live on Greer Ranch, right? I mean, I'll even click on a house there. I know I'll never be able to afford a house there. Nor will I want to, because I'd probably move somewhere else at that price point. But those are $1 million homes in a $300,000 area. So, you'll come in and you can say, you're making a move to Greer Ranch, and obviously nobody who's going to apply for this thing qualifies. Some will, but a lot of them won't. And then you get to be the one that sets the expectation for them and say, well, I understand what you're looking for, but then again, we're going to move it back down to, reality. So that's the solution right there. The solution is that part. We have the insider information. We have the systems. We're able to help you. We're all this stuff. And that's the solution. And then you want to do a call to action. To get all this information, all you need is to click right here, or to be a part of this weekly list of homes that we're sending out. Because that's another thing you can do is send out a list of homes on the MLS. You can go in there and send a weekly, ticker to send them off homes in their qualification spectrum. And so you can do that too. And then just, whatever that is, get this by submitting your information now. And then have them go directly from there to the place where they can opt in. You can either do it on Facebook with lead ads. I love lead ads. You can do it like a separate landing page if you need to. The choice is yours as far as that goes. But you always want hook, problem, solution, call to action with your ad text. However you phrase it, if you're a little more aggressive in the South or in the North, or if you're more laid back with the way that you say things on the West Coast, like I found, that's okay. As long as you follow that formula, you should still be able to convert a fair amount of local leads.
Fantastic. I could go on again for a very long, extended REI Diamonds episode, but we're going to switch gears again if that's cool, Todd.
Absolutely.
So is there any single idea, system, or strategy that you've implemented, in your personal business or in the big business over the last 12 to 24 months and experienced exponential growth as a result?
100% social media marketing and detailed conversion systems. I know you said two things, but you probably said not to say two things, but those things in congruence with one another is insane, because here's why. You have expert social media, lead generation, branding, you know what you're doing. You maybe watch some of my videos, maybe you have your own understanding, but you know what you're converting leads in. Those leads have the highest dropout of any other lead that you can get. So on the back end, if you have something like Infusionsoft or Insight, for example, that converts those leads for you and turns them into actual clients and automates the whole process, you're taking out a huge amount of legwork that you used to be doing, at least I used to be doing, on prospecting, on making sure these deals come alive, on reviving old leads, when what I should have been doing is focused more on my clients. And because when you do that, you actually get more referral business because they see that you're laser focused on what you're doing. You're not taking phone calls every 5 minutes, but it's important to be able to convert the leads too. So that combination, really strong understanding of social media, marketing, things like that, combined with a very robust system to generate and convert your leads and categorize them out, it takes a lot of work off of your shoulders. You basically hire an ISA, teach them how to use your system, and then just run away with it. That's almost how easy it gets. So that's turned my business from a single agent kind of a thing to team leader, and we're actually teaching this stuff to the 400 agents here at Home Sotheby's, which is the number one real estate company in coastal Orange County. It's the luxury market. They're all adapting this right now, because that's one way that you can really show, at least I was able to do this, really show my differentiation, not only in how I was able to prospect, which they want to see that as well, but also how that skill of being able to prospect can then translate to what I can do for their listing. To be able to master that in a conversational sense, I think is key. And to do it, I think, is even further. So yeah, I mean, that's my one thing. If every agent here, like one action item today, go learn about the right way to, like, go on Facebook's blueprint if you have to. It's super wordy, and I reworded all of that on my site, but go there if you have to and learn the mechanics of Facebook on the back end, because it's all just a math problem. And if you can game that math problem, those leads belong to you. And it's as simple as that. I know how pitchy that sounds, but that's really the one thing I'll say, is that if you can game that math problem, then everything that comes as a result of that function is yours, because you've earned it. You've effectively taken something everyone uses without intention, rewired it for intentional purposes, and then you see the gains that come from there. So absolutely, I think that's strong right there as far as what I've done in the last 24 months, really 18 months, and seen a huge change in the way I do business.
So Todd, as an agent, I know this is like investor / we have a lot of agents who obviously tune into the show, but has your success as a real estate agent come by emphasizing your marketing and your efforts more so on sellers, maybe 60-40 versus buyers, or has it been an equal emphasis 50-50 on buyers and sellers, or have you built your successful business by focusing, say, 60% on buyers and 40% on sellers, or maybe some other different ratio?
Here's what people are going to think of me as an insane person for saying this. I focus 100% on buyers, 100% on buyers, and we're still fairly active in the listing category. The reason that's the case is, I mentioned this before too, almost always. I mean, I can name a couple of examples where this won't be the case, and it's mainly for things that we won't be aware of until after we're in contract with the person to begin with. But in almost every single case, a seller is just a buyer who needs to sell his house before he buys the next one. Almost always. There are, of course, people who sell and then they go rent, so that's fine too, or they may sell and relocate or something like that. But what it boils down to is everybody realistically is buying property, even the ones who are selling. So if what you do is not really change your approach, but just change your targeting, run buyers ads to homeowners, for example, what you're really doing is running seller traffic or second home traffic, which one or the other. I mean, it depends. Some people are homeowners and they'll buy a second or a third home, but that's not as common. If you look at NAR statistics, I don't have in front of me, but I always harp on these statistics, that it's more likely for a homeowner to sell their property and buy another one than they are to just simply buy another one. And that's going by the median, not the average. So 100% on buyers, because a lot of those are going to turn out to be buyers. I've got a great relationship with my loan guy, so he's able to factor in anything necessary for like a contingent sale if they're, in the middle of selling their own property. And a lot of times people will look at homes in their new price point before they even make a decision what to do with their current one, because of the way that you can treat rental property and things like that, if there's not a whole lot of equity there. So because, again, you're getting them in that sweet spot of, before they go and they make 100 phone calls to 100 agents, right now they're just browsing, an idea just came to their head because of you, and they go through it. 100% buyers, 100%, because you're going to get a ton of selling business that way too. If you think of everyone as in real estate as a buyer, at minimum a buyer, then it becomes much easier to deal with the outliers of sellers that come in too. And I'll say that we actually get a lot more traffic from sellers, like for repeat business. So we'll be promoting the buyer side. We'll get the listing because they have to sell their current house. We'll get the buy side, and then we'll get the next listing in the future too, because we help them with 2 transactions, and we can use that in the future to farm the pipeline. I'm not sure how helpful that was, but that's kind of like more a philosophical thing than anything else. But that's how I look at the market.
I think you've outlined some really great successful points in a completely opposing philosophical view that I know a lot of people hold, including myself. I'm not a real estate agent. I am an investor only. So I'm primarily focused on sellers, and if they need to actually buy another property after they sell to us, which is typically not the case when we're buying properties that need renovations, we can't really service that need, and I guess we're primarily focused on the outliers here. So that's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting take, Todd. I really appreciate you sharing that so candidly with our audience here. So who would you identify as being the most successful real estate investor, and I'm going to adjust this slightly for you, developer or real estate agent or broker of record? And could you also define why you believe they're successful?
If you don't mind, I'd like to answer both really quickly. The first, for the actual developer, Party Homes in my area does an amazing job at taking raw resources and natural beauty of an area, preserving that, and then creating homes around that, as opposed to, they're still track homes, right? They're still in a development, but I think they do a really, really great job. As far as the most productive, the most, what was the question? The most productive agent?
Well, the most
influential
real estate investor, developer,
successful,
or however you would define successful is kind of where we're going with that.
You got it. So what I'd say is that of course I'm going to go with, Mike Shapiro doing what he did and turning a bankrupt company into what's now the number one company. But in our office, we have probably one of the top producers in the United States as a whole, which is Sean Stanfield. And Sean Stanfield and his team, and this is why I think it applies to investors as well, is because that team does almost nothing except for system building. Of course, they'll, do the transactions that comes in, but they see their role as a way to make more streamlined real estate system, more streamlined ways of finding distressed properties, more streamlined ways of actually getting the lead into conversation, and from conversation then on. That's where they see their role as, because they see it as a forward and growing business that simply has to do business in the interim to stay alive, but really the way that business is being done, as we can see with, like Weiss Analytics, for example, has vastly changed. So to be able to stay on the point of that, which is what they're doing, while still devoting resources to actually getting deals done and farming in traditional ways and bring the old in with the new, I think that's why they're doing what they're doing. And I think his team is somewhere around $500 million a year in terms of what's closed. And that's nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, that's certainly, and of course we can blame the property values up here being so high as a way to get to that number, but that number still remains as, it's not easy in any market. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'll say about that, man.
Cool. 2 or 3 book recommendations you've made most often, Todd?
Oh man, if I can just give the 2, that'd be good, because I only had 2 prepared down, and I'd probably think the third one. But The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes, may he rest in peace. Oh my goodness, it's so vital on being a proactive owner of your business and of your space, as opposed to being reactive to things that go on around you. So I think that's really, really, for any aspect of what we do, be it ground level or managerial, I think it's so important. I think that the conversion code is one of, in my mind, like the strongest treatises on how best to generate leads online. It's by Charles Smith. So the guy who made the Curator program, if you guys know Curator for real estate content, for lead generation, things like that, the inventor of that wrote a book called The Conversion Code, and it goes through exactly what you need from someone who has no experience in funnel creation or marketing or social media stuff. It takes you line by line on what matters and what doesn't matter. And I think it's really great. It's like a $20 book as well. And then this is like kind of a lame one, not lame, but it's one I enjoy a lot. And I think a lot of people enjoy it. Is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that's really, really important in our day-to-day lives, to be able to understand the different personalities that are out there, be able to script ourselves to those conversations, and then just really hone in on the best ways to, of course, just be better at what we do, right? Because there is a human aspect, no matter how good no matter how good insight CRM gets, it's never going to be a replacement for the agent. It's going to be a tool for the agent. So the agent still has to be, somewhat presidential, somewhat, have some gravitas in the situation to maintain that rock of being, you are the expert everyone's turning to, own it, right? And I think I like that book for that reason too. So those 3 I say are very good choices.
Cool. Thank you, Todd. And if you could share the crown jewel of wisdom with your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
What I would tell an 18-year-old self who's also just getting started in this business, I tell the kid, I tell him, don't listen to what everyone tells you doesn't work, because the only people who are going to tell you something doesn't work are the people who failed at it. The person who's making it work and killing it, and you can see who's doing it just by, looking at the market, that person will never come in and say that doesn't work or don't try it, right? Because trying something is how he got there. So for younger agents in general, like don't let people push you around because of your age, because you You have just as much legal clout. And here's one thing too. And I wish I told myself this, because there's actually a specific listing that I lost because I didn't have the right answer until 2 years later. Because I was up against an agent who had been doing this for 35 years. Okay. So she comes in, I've been doing this for 35 years. And this was like in 2010 or something like that. And I was like, well, I've been doing it for 2, so I can understand, not the greatest salesperson. I'm a data analyst. I'm not like a sales guy. So what ended up happening with this is I went home and I realized, I'm like, she had 35 years in this business, but 25 of those years were before the crisis happened. So before like Dodd-Frank and all that stuff really got down and changed the legal landscape of how we do business. And then another 3 or 4 years was before the implementation of the CFPB, which further changed the way we do business. So it's like, in this new playing field, yeah, you might have more experience selling homes and dealing with people. We have equal experience as a new agent just coming in as someone who's just been here since before even the financial crisis happened, right? And it's just a matter of owning that confidence, realizing that your age is not like an excuse for you to not know the material, because age is so important. I mean, overcoming that ageism is so important for a younger agent that if you miss a single step, you're done. And just use the tools that that you see everyone using. So back then I was talking about Facebook and Instagram and what to use, what not to use, and everyone's like, that doesn't work. And I think I'm here kind of as proof that, it does work. You just have to go in and dive into it. So those 3 things I think I would tell myself, if I were, and maybe I should write myself like a post-dated note to look back at myself, 10 years from now, what would I respond to my 26-year-old self? Who knows?
Yeah, that's funny, man. The ageism thing. I think I was 26 when I got in the business, and I felt it at that age. And to hear you talk about it when you're 18, I can only imagine, 20, 21. A lot of the guys that work with me on my team around the country are, 23, 25. They started when they were 21, 22, and I know they had to overcome that as well. So it's definitely, looking back, it seems like so elementary, like, hey, just, go ahead and do it. But it's a lot easier after you've been in the business 3 years, 5 years, 7 years to get over the ageism thing. So what great advice, especially if somebody's listening who maybe can relate to that right now. Tod, if anybody wants to get some more information about you, the program you spoke about, is there somewhere that you'd like people to go online or otherwise to figure out more about you?
Yeah, 2 places. One is if you have any interest in Insight, which is that system I kept bringing up that has all of the courses for social media that I've hacked, all of the automations, pre-built funnels, pre-built landing pages, everything you need to get started doing what I do on the internet, right? That can be found at insightcrm.io. It's important to remember IO, not because .com doesn't exist. So insightcrm.io is how you can get in touch with that. If you just want to be on my mailing list to get like the most recent social media stuff, or if you have any questions for me directly, like to book a time, I'll give my email address too. It's my personal work one. I call it a personal work email address. I've got personal too. And that one is Tod@workwithtod.com. You spell my name with 1 D, T-O-D, @workwithtod.com. I answer emails within an hour. Anything from it's nice to meet you to, hey, that point you made was ridiculous and you should recant that. I'll always get back to you guys, and I'll always be happy to have a conversation with you about anything regarding economics, social media, business development, how to implement the old with the new. Absolutely.
Fantastic, Tod. Well, I will include that information in the show notes along with this episode. So if you are listening, you can check us out, and I will make sure that information is posted. Tod, I really appreciate you giving of your time here. I've got like 3-4 pages of notes here, a variety of topics that, like I said during the episode, I'd love to go on, 45 minutes, an hour on each one, but I really appreciate you taking the time out and sharing of your wisdom. Come on the show.
Of course. Hey, Dan, I got to greatly appreciate what you do. I love what REI Diamond's all about. I got turned on to you guys several years back, so to be on your show is like a very, very cool thing for me. So thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Nice. Thanks, Tod. And thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamond Show. Are you interested in receiving a notification when I release the next episode? You can either sign up for email at www.reidiamonds.com or subscribe through one of the podcasting apps, including iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Do you have investment capital not currently earning a high rate of return? I've recently opened up my business to a select group of private investors. Would you like to talk with me about potentially becoming one of those private investors? You can contact me directly by clicking the Contact Dan link at www.reidiamonds.com, and we can set up a time for a quick call. And if you are interested in selling a deal to me, visit www.reidiamonds.com and click the link at the top of the page. I'm currently looking for deals in Philadelphia, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Chicago, Atlanta, Georgia, and the Tampa Bay area in Florida. And finally, if you are enjoying the show and know somebody else who might also enjoy the show, I'm going to ask that you forward this email to them. I appreciate the referrals, and I appreciate you, my loyal REI Diamond Show listener. Dan Breslin here. I will catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamonds Show with Dan Breslin. To receive email notifications of new weekly episodes, sign up at www.reidiamonds.com.